He left me $0 on purpose. Then I found a note under his plate with a time, an address, and a single line that felt like a threat. I thought it was a scam until his security guard called me by a name I had never told anyone. By the end of that week, my family was begging, and a billionaire's empire was about to go to war over me. My name is Brooklyn Rivera. I am 33 years old, and if you cut me open, I am pretty sure I would bleed canola oil and sweet tea. The Gulf View Grill did not just employ me, it consumed me. It was a small, boxy diner perched on the edge of Galveston, Texas, right where the humidity coming off the Gulf of Mexico felt heavy enough to wear like a wet wool coat. The air inside the diner was always thick with the smell of frying catfish and the stale, sugary scent of pancake syrup. Overhead, 3 ceiling fans wobbled on their mounts, clicking rhythmically as they tried and failed to cut through the heat. It was the kind of place tourists found charming for exactly 45 minutes before the noise and the grease set in. For me, it was not charming. It was a cage. My mother, Darla, and my stepfather, Wade, owned the place, though saying they owned it was a bit of a stretch. The bank owned the roof, the walls, and the deep fryers, and we were just the tenants who paid the rent in sweat. Wade liked to stand by the register, wiping his forehead with a rag that had been gray since 2010, preaching his favorite sermon to anyone who would listen. "Family is first," he would say, usually right after screaming at the busboy for dropping a fork. "In this house, we stick together, we survive together." It was a nice sentiment. It looked great cross-stitched on a pillow. But in the Rivera household, family is first actually translated to something much uglier. It meant that my tips were not really my tips. It meant that when the walk-in freezer broke down, my savings account was the emergency fund. It meant that I was 33 years old, sleeping in a converted garage behind the main house, and working 6 days a week for a paycheck that usually dissolved into the restaurant's operating costs before I could even cash it. I was trapped in a loop of guilt and exhaustion. Every time I thought about leaving, about taking my car and driving north until the air stopped smelling like salt and desperation, Darla would give me that look. It was a wounded, terrified look that said I was abandoning them to drown. "You are all we have, Brooklyn," she would whisper. Usually while tallying up the lunch receipts. "We can't run this place without you." So I stayed. I poured coffee. I smiled at tourists who complained that the shrimp was too spicy or the ice was too melted. I let the days bleed into one another until I could not tell a Tuesday from a Saturday. The only person who told me the truth was Jessa Miller. Jessa worked as a dispatcher for the county emergency services, which meant she spent 12 hours a day listening to people having the worst moments of their lives. It made her immune to nonsense. She would come in on her lunch break, sitting at the counter in her uniform, watching me scramble to cover 3 sections at once. "You do not owe them a lifetime of labor." "Brooklyn," she would tell me, stabbing at a Cobb salad like it had personally offended her. "They are my parents." "Jessa," I would say, wiping down the counter. "Wade is stressed. The season has been slow. Wade is a leech." She would correct me, her voice low enough that Wade could not hear from the register. "And Darla is too scared to tell him to get a real job. You are the engine of this sinking ship. Brooke, if you stop rowing, they go under. That is not love. That is a hostage situation." I knew she was right. That was the worst part. I knew she was right, but knowing it and acting on it were 2 different continents, and I did not have a bridge. Then came that Tuesday. It was mid-July, and the heat index was hovering somewhere near 105 degrees. The air conditioning unit on the roof was wheezing, rattling its death rattle, and the diner was packed shoulder to shoulder with sunburned tourists. The noise level was deafening. It was a cacophony of crying babies, clattering silverware, and the sizzling hiss of the grill. I was in the weeds, juggling 4 tables that had all been seated at once. Table 6 wanted extra ranch. Table 4 wanted to know if the gluten-free toast was actually gluten-free. Table 8 was a family of 7 screaming for refills on their sodas. I was behind the service station, frantically slicing lemons, when the atmosphere in the room changed. It was not a sound. It was the absence of sound. Usually, You could hear cars pulling into the gravel lot outside. You heard the crunch of tires on stone, the slam of rusted doors, the revving of pickup trucks, but this was different. A low, powerful vibration hummed through the floorboards. It felt like heavy machinery. I looked up through the front window, wiping sweat from my temple with the back of my hand. 3 black SUVs had pulled up to the curb, directly in front of the entrance. They were enormous, glossy, and spotless, looking like sleek sharks swimming through dirty water. They were parked with military precision, inches apart. The tinted windows were so dark, they looked like polished obsidian. The diner went quiet. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Even the baby at table 8 stopped crying. In Galveston, we got rich tourists. Sure, we got guys in BMWs coming down from Houston for the weekend, but we did not get motorcades. This looked like a scene from a movie where the president stops for a photo op, or a cartel boss comes to collect a debt. The doors of the lead and rear SUVs opened simultaneously. 4 men stepped out. They wore dark suits despite the heat, with earpieces coiled behind their ears and sunglasses that hid their eyes. They scanned the parking lot, the street, and the roofline of the bait shop across the road. Then, one of them opened the back door of the middle vehicle. Graham Whitlock stepped out. I did not know his name then. I only knew that I had never seen anyone like him in my life. He was an older man, perhaps in his early 70s, but he moved with a fluid, predatory grace that made him seem younger. He wore a light gray suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life, looking cool and crisp while everyone else within a 5-mile radius was sweating through their t-shirts. His hair was silver and swept back, and his face was a map of deep lines and sharp angles. He did not look around the parking lot. He did not look at the view of the ocean. He looked straight at the door of the Gulf View Grill. He walked in, and the air inside the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. 2 of his security guards entered first, taking up positions on either side of the door. The other 2 stayed outside. The man himself walked to the host stand, where Wade was standing with his mouth slightly open, looking like he had just seen a ghost or a winning lottery ticket. "Table for 1, the man said. His voice was not loud, but it carried. It was dry and precise, like paper being cut. "Private service. The corner booth with the view." Wade snapped out of his trance. The greed that washed over his face was so immediate it was almost embarrassing to watch. Wade Rivera could smell money from a county away, and this man smelled like the Federal Reserve. "Yes, sir. Absolutely. Sir. Right this way. Sir," Wade stammered, grabbing a menu. He practically bowed as he led the man through the silent diner. He took him to table 12, the corner booth that looked out over the seawall. It was the best seat in the house, usually reserved for parties of 4, but Wade did not care. He seated the man, placed the menu down like it was a sacred text, and then sprinted back toward the service station where I was standing. "Brooklyn," Wade hissed, grabbing my arm. His fingers dug into my skin. "You are taking table 12. "I can't, Wade," I said, pulling my arm back. "I have 4 tables already. The family at 8 is waiting on drinks." "And forget table 8, Wade whispered, his eyes wide and frantic. "Look at that guy. Did you see the cars? That is a whale. Brooklyn, that is the kind of customer who leaves a $500 tip if you smile right. We need this. The electric bill is due on Friday and we are short. You work that table. You make him happy." He did not wait for an answer. He shoved me toward the floor. I took a breath, smoothed my apron, and grabbed my notepad. I told myself to calm down. It was just a man. Just a rich guy who probably wanted a quiet lunch away from his ivory tower. I had served rich people before. They usually wanted their dressing on the side and their iced tea with no ice. I could handle this. I walked toward table 12. The man was sitting perfectly still. He had not opened the menu. His hands were folded on the table in front of him. They were manicured hands, but they looked strong. As I approached, he turned his head slowly to look at me. That was when the feeling hit me. Usually, when men looked at me in the diner, it was one of 2 things. They were either hungry for food, or they were hungry for something else. I was used to the wandering eyes, the unwanted compliments, the clumsy attempts at flirting. I had armor for that. I knew how to laugh it off, how to deflect, how to keep the tip while keeping my distance. But this man was not looking at me like that. His eyes were a pale, icy blue, and they were devoid of any warmth. He did not look at my body. He looked at my face. He looked at my hands. He looked at the way I held my pen. It felt like he was taking me apart, layer by layer. It was an evaluation. It felt clinical, detached, and terrifyingly intense. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. "Good afternoon, sir," I said, forcing my customer service smile onto my face. It felt tight. "My name is Brooklyn. I will be taking care of you today. Can I start you off with something to drink?" He did not blink. He just held my gaze for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. He was studying me. He was searching for something in my features. "Ice water," he said finally, "with lemon and the blackened redfish, no sauce." He did not look at the menu. He knew what he wanted. "Is that all?" "Sir," I asked. "For now," he said. I turned to walk away, and I could feel his eyes on my back. The hair on my arms stood up. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, thumping rhythm that had nothing to do with the lunch rush. Just a meal, I told myself as I hurried toward the soda fountain. Just a rich old man. Don't think too much about it. But my hands were shaking as I scooped the ice. I could not shake the feeling that something had just walked into the Gulfview grill that was far bigger than a lunch order. Wade saw a walking ATM. Darla probably saw a story to tell her friends at bingo. But I saw something else. I saw a predator who had just swum into our little pond, and for some reason, he had decided to stop swimming right in front of me. I looked over my shoulder as I filled the glass. He was still watching me. He was not looking at the ocean. He was not looking at his phone. He was watching me slice the lemon. I took a deep breath, steadied my hand, and walked back into the lion's den. I had no idea that the man sitting at table 12 was about to dismantle my entire life with the precision of a surgeon. Starting with a bill that would total $24.50, the meal proceeded with the agonizing slowness of a dripping faucet in the middle of the night. Graham Whitlock did not eat like a man enjoying a lunch break. He ate like a man disarming a bomb. He cut his blackened redfish into precise, geometric squares, chewing each bite with a rhythmic deliberation that was almost hypnotic to watch. He did not look at his phone. He did not read a newspaper. He did not stare out at the Gulf of Mexico, where the brown waves were churning against the seawall. He watched me. Every time I passed his table, I felt the weight of that gaze. It was not the leering look I got from the construction workers in booth 4, nor was it the impatient glare of the mother at table 8, who was angry that her child's grilled cheese was taking too long. It was a data collection stare. He was cataloging my movements. When I topped off his water glass, he watched my hands to see if they shook. When I apologized to the couple at the next table for the delay in their order, he watched my eyes to see if my smile reached them. It was exhausting. I felt like I was performing a one-woman show on a stage I had not asked to be on, and the only audience member was a judge who had already decided I was guilty of something. The diner was reaching its peak volume. The lunch rush at the Gulfview Grill was a physical assault on the senses. The smell of frying grease was so thick, it felt like it was coating the inside of my lungs. The noise was a solid wall of sound clattering plates, the hiss of the espresso machine, the roar of the deep fryer, and the overlapping conversations of 50 people trying to talk over one another. I was carrying a large oval tray on my shoulder, balanced on my left hand. It was heavy, loaded with 4 Grand Slam breakfasts, 3 large orange juices, and a milkshake that was already starting to weep condensation down the side of the glass. I was moving fast, navigating the narrow aisle between the booths and the center tables, my eyes scanning the floor for dropped napkins or spilled ice. Suddenly, a large man in a floral shirt at table 5 threw his arms back to stretch, oblivious to the world around him. His elbow shot out into the aisle, right into my path. It happened in a fraction of a second. His elbow clipped my hip, hard. The impact knocked me off balance. My feet tangled. The heavy tray on my shoulder pitched violently to the right. In any other universe, that tray would have crashed. The plates would have shattered. The eggs would have splattered across the floor, and the milkshake would have exploded over the man in the floral shirt. It would have been a disaster. Wade would have screamed. The customers would have gasped. I would have spent the next 20 minutes on my hands and knees cleaning up glass and syrup while holding back tears. But that did not happen. My body reacted before my brain even registered the collision. It was pure muscle memory, honed by 15 years of dodging children and drunk tourists. I dropped my center of gravity, bending my knees sharply to absorb the stumble. At the same time, I twisted my left wrist, counterbalancing the tilting tray. I swung my right hand up, catching the edge of the tray just as the milkshake began to slide. I froze. I was in a low crouch, my muscles screaming, the tray hovering at a 45-degree angle. But everything was secure. Not a drop of orange juice had spilled. The man in the floral shirt turned around, blinking. "Oh, excuse me. Darlin'?" he said, oblivious to the catastrophe I had just averted. I exhaled slowly, straightened my legs, and leveled the tray. I forced the tension out of my shoulders and plastered a smile on my face. "You are fine, sir," I said, my voice steady. Plenty of room. I walked on, delivering the food to table 9 without a tremor in my hands. But as I turned back toward the kitchen, my eyes flickered involuntarily toward the corner booth. Graham Whitlock had stopped chewing. His fork was hovering halfway to his mouth. He was looking right at me. For the first time, the cold neutrality of his expression had cracked. There was something else there now. It looked like recognition. It looked like he had just confirmed a hypothesis. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, then lowered his fork and went back to his fish. 20 minutes later, he raised a single finger. I walked over. His plate was clean. The lemon wedges were stacked in a neat pile. The napkin was folded beside the silverware. "The check, please," he said. I nodded and pulled the ticket from my apron. I placed it face down on the table. "Take your time, sir." I walked back to the register where Wade was pretending to organize toothpicks. He was practically vibrating with anticipation. "He is done," Wade whispered, leaning over the counter. "Did he ask for anything else? Did he seem happy?" "He is done," I said. "He seemed fine." "Fine," Wade hissed. "Fine doesn't pay the mortgage. Brooklyn. Fine doesn't fix the roof. People like that. They don't just leave 20%. They leave $100 bills just to show they can." Watch. You watch. I watched. From the corner of my eye, I saw Whitlock pull a sleek black leather wallet from his jacket. He did not use a credit card. He pulled out a crisp $50 bill and a few smaller bills. He arranged them on the table, anchoring them with the salt shaker. Then he stood up. He did not look back. He buttoned his jacket, signaled to his security team outside, and walked out the door. The bells above the entrance jingled cheerfully, a stark contrast to the heavy silence he left in his wake. "Go! Go!" Wade nudged me. "Get the table before someone else sits down." I walked over to table 12. My heart was beating a little faster. Despite my cynicism, Wade's desperation was contagious. If there was $100 on that table, it would mean I could pay my car insurance this month without asking for an advance. It would mean a week of breathing room. I reached the table. I lifted the salt shaker. I counted the money. The bill was $24.50. On the table, arranged with military precision, was a $20 bill, 4 $1 bills, and 2 quarters. $24.50. There was nothing else. No extra bills, no loose change, not even a penny. I stared at the cash. I felt a flush of heat climb up my neck. It was not just disappointment. It was humiliation. He had watched me work. He had watched me sweat. He had seen me save that tray with the grace of a dancer. And he had deemed my service worth exactly $0. It was a statement. It was a deliberate erasure of my effort. Zero Wade's voice boomed from behind me. I jumped. He had come out from behind the counter, unable to wait. I held up the cash. "Exact change," I said, my voice flat. That cheap, miserable son of a Wade cut himself off because there were children present. But his face turned a deep, blotchy red. I gave him the best view in the house. I kicked the Millers out of that booth for him, and he stiffs us. He stiffs you. Darla came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. What is it? Did he tip Big Zero? Wade spat. Not a dime. Darla's face crumbled. Well, she said, her voice taking on that familiar tone of martyrdom, I guess the rich stay rich by stepping on the poor. It figures. Just our luck. Always our luck. I stood there, holding the $24.50, feeling like a fool. I wanted to be angry at them for caring only about the money, but I was angry too. It felt personal. Just bust the table. Brooklyn, Wade grumbled, turning his back. Turn it over. We need the covers. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. I put the cash in my apron pocket and reached for the empty plate. I was angry. I was tired. I wanted to sweep the dishes into the bin and walk out the back door. I grabbed the edge of the large dinner plate and lifted it up. My breath hitched. There, sitting squarely in the center of the placemat, exactly where the plate had been hiding it, was a piece of paper. It was not a napkin. It was a piece of heavy, cream-colored stationery, folded in half with a sharp crease. It had been placed there deliberately. If I had just wiped the table without lifting the plate, I might have swept it onto the floor, but he knew I would lift the plate. He knew the routine. I glanced around. Wade was back at the register. Complaining to a regular, Darla was back in the kitchen. No one was watching. I picked up the paper. It felt expensive, thick and textured between my thumb and forefinger. I unfolded it. The handwriting was black ink, slanted and jagged, aggressive but controlled. There were 3 lines. The first line was an address in Houston, a specific house number on a street I recognized from the news, a street in River Oaks, where the houses cost more than my entire neighborhood combined. The second line was a time Wednesday, 7:00 p.m. The third line made the blood drain from my face. No tip. Your tip is the truth. Bring the receipt. I stared at the words. The sounds of the diner seemed to fade away, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. Your tip is the truth. What did that mean? It felt like a threat. It felt like a lure. Who leaves a note like that? Was this some kind of sick game? Was he one of those rich eccentrics who like to toy with working-class people, dangling a carrot just to see if we would jump? My first instinct was to crumple it up. I should throw it in the trash with the leftover coleslaw and the used napkins. I should forget I ever saw it. I should go back to my life, to my safe, miserable loop of frying catfish and paying bills, but I didn't. My hand closed around the paper, crushing it slightly. I looked toward the door, half expecting him to be standing there, watching me read it. But the parking lot was empty of the black SUVs. He was gone. Brooklyn Table 4 needs refills. Wade yelled. I jumped. Comin'. I yelled back. I shoved the note deep into the pocket of my apron, right next to the $24.50. It felt hot against my hip, like a piece of burning coal. That night, the air in my converted garage was stagnant and heavy. The window unit hummed and rattled, but it did little to cut the humidity. I lay on my back, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. The note was sitting on my nightstand. I had taken it out, smoothed the creases, and read it a dozen times. Wednesday, 7:00. River Oaks. It was a 2-hour drive to Houston. I had a shift on Wednesday night. I would have to lie to Wade to get out of it. I would have to tell him I was sick, or that the car broke down. Why was I even considering it? It was insane. You do not go to the home of a stranger who leaves cryptic notes and travels with a private army. That is how people end up on the news in the bad way. But then I thought about his eyes. I thought about the way he had looked at me when I caught the tray. He hadn't looked at me like a waitress. He hadn't looked at me like a woman. He had looked at me like I was a puzzle he had just solved. Your tip is the truth about what I rolled over, punching my pillow. I thought about my life. I thought about the grease that never really washed out of my hair. I thought about Darla's guilt trips and Wade's greed. I thought about the emptiness of the last 10 years, the feeling that I was waiting for a bus that was never coming. If this was a scam, what did I have to lose? I had no money to steal. I had no reputation to ruin. But if it wasn't a scam, the phrase echoed in the dark room. Your tip is the truth. It terrified me. It wasn't the promise of money that kept me awake. Money was simple. Money was just math. This was something else. This felt like he knew something about me that even I didn't know. I closed my eyes, but sleep did not come. Every time I drifted off, I saw the black ink on the cream paper. By the time the sun began to bleed gray light through my thin curtains, I knew two things for certain. First, I was going to call in sick on Wednesday, and second, I was going to keep that receipt. I sat in the passenger seat of Jessa's beat-up Honda Civic, my hands gripping the dashboard as if I could physically hold on to my sanity. The air conditioner was blasting, smelling faintly of vanilla and old fast food wrappers. Outside, the humid Texas afternoon was pressing against the glass, but inside, the temperature was freezing. "You cannot go," Jessa said, staring at the note in my lap. She looked at me with wide, serious eyes. "Brooklyn, look at me. This is how episodes of true crime podcasts start. You drive to a stranger's house in a city 2 hours away because he left you a cryptic note. No, absolutely not." I ran my thumb over the heavy cream paper. "I know how it sounds, Jess. But you did not see him. You did not see the way he looked at me. It was not sexual. It was not creepy in that way. It was calculating. Calculating is worse," Jessa argued, throwing her hands up. "Serial killers are calculating. Cult leaders are calculating. Why can't you just ignore it because of what it says?" I whispered. "Your tip is the truth. What if he knows something? Jessa knows something about what you are, a waitress from Galveston. Your life is an open book. You work. You pay Wade's bills. You sleep. There is no mystery here." "Brooke," I looked out the window. That was the problem. There was no mystery, just a long gray line of days stretching out until I died. But the feeling in my gut, that cold prickle I had felt when Graham Whitlock looked at me, told me otherwise. "I have to go," I said firmly. "Fine," Jessa said, putting the car in gear. "Then I am coming with you. I will wait in the car. If you are not out in 10 minutes, I am calling the SWAT team." "No," I said, grabbing her arm. "You can't. If this goes bad, I cannot have you there. You have kids. Jessa, you have a life. I am not dragging you into a potential mess. Then I am not letting you go," she countered. I pulled out my phone. "I will turn on my live location. I will text you every 15 minutes. If I miss a check-in by even 1 minute, you call the cops. Please, Jessa, I need to do this alone." She stared at me for a long time, searching my face. Finally, she sighed, a sound of pure frustration. "You are an idiot. Brooklyn Rivera. A brave idiot. But an idiot." Getting past Jessa was the easy part. Getting past Darla and Wade was the gauntlet. I walked into the house, clutching my purse, trying to look casual. Wade was at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of overdue invoices with a look of doom. Darla was pacing by the stove. "I am taking the car," I said, keeping my voice even. "I have to go to Houston." Wade's head snapped up. "Houston. You have a shift at 4. We are short-staffed. You are not going anywhere. I am not asking." "Wade, I am telling you, I have an appointment." He stood up, his face reddening. "An appointment. Since when do you have appointments? We have a business to run. Family comes first. Brooklyn, you can't just—" "It is the man from yesterday," I said. The room went silent. Wade froze. Darla stopped pacing. "The rich guy?" Wade asked, his voice dropping an octave. "The one with the security detail." "Yes," I said. "He wants to see me." Wade's eyes narrowed, shifting from anger to a greasy sort of curiosity. He took a step closer. Why did he realize he stiffed us? Is he going to make it right? "I don't know. I lied," Darla chimed in, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and anxiety. "Maybe he wants to hire us for catering. Did you think of that? A man like that could put us on the map. 5 minutes ago, I was abandoning the family. Now, I was a business opportunity. It made my stomach turn." "How rich is he?" Wade asked, leaning on the table. "You saw the car. Was it a rental?" "It wasn't a rental," I said, remembering the polished black metal and the silent, terrifying efficiency of his guards. "He is wealthy. Wade, extremely wealthy." Wade exchanged a look with Darla. It was a look I knew well. It was the look of two drowning people spotting a piece of driftwood. "Well," Wade said, smoothing his shirt, his tone suddenly reasonable, "if it is a business opportunity we cannot be rude. You should go. Just see what he wants. And Brooklyn," I paused at the door. "Don't come back empty-handed," he said. I drove to Houston in silence. The old Toyota rattled as I pushed it to 70 miles per hour on the highway, the AC struggling against the Texas heat. As I crossed the city limits, the landscape changed. The industrial sprawl gave way to the towering glass skyline, and then, as I turned off the highway, the world became green and quiet. River Oaks was not just a neighborhood, it was a fortress of wealth. The streets were lined with oak trees so old their branches touched over the road, creating a tunnel of shade. The houses were set back far from the street, hidden behind iron gates and high hedges. Everything was perfectly manicured. There was no trash. There were no broken cars on lawns. It felt like I had driven onto a movie set. I followed the GPS, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I turned onto a street called Inwood Drive. The houses here were mansions, sprawling estates that looked like they belonged in Europe, not Texas. I found the address. It was a massive estate surrounded by a 10-foot iron fence. The driveway was paved with cobblestones. There was a guardhouse at the gate. I pulled my rusty Toyota up to the sleek intercom system. I rolled down my window, feeling absurd. I expected a voice to tell me to get lost. I expected to be turned away before I even got close. I reached out to press the button, but before my finger could touch the metal, a voice spoke from the speaker. It was crisp and clear. "Miss Rivera," the voice said. I froze. I hadn't said a word. "Yes," I squeaked, then cleared my throat. "Yes, this is Brooklyn Rivera. We have been expecting you," the voice said. "The gate will open. Please drive to the main entrance. Leave your vehicle under the portico. One of the staff will park it for you." The massive iron gates swung open soundlessly. I drove through. I felt like I was crossing a border into a foreign country where I did not speak the language. The driveway was long, curving past a fountain that was bigger than my entire apartment. The house itself was a white stone monolith, imposing and beautiful. Two men in suits were waiting under the portico. They looked exactly like the men from the diner. Same earpieces, same lack of expression. I stopped the car and got out. My legs felt shaky. "Keys, please," one of the men said, holding out a hand. I dropped my keys into his palm. He did not sneer at my car or the fading paint on the hood. He treated it with the same professional indifference he would have treated a Ferrari. "Follow me," the second man said. He led me to the massive front doors. They opened before we reached them. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of expensive wood polish and fresh lilies. The foyer was enormous, with a black and white marble floor that shone like glass. The guard led me down a long hallway lined with oil paintings of people who looked severe and important. We stopped at a set of double mahogany doors. The guard knocked once, then opened the door. "Mr. Whitlock is waiting," he said. I stepped inside. It was a library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound books that looked like they had actually been read. In the center of the room, behind a massive dark wood desk, sat Graham Whitlock. He looked exactly as he had in the diner, except now he was not wearing a jacket. He was in a crisp white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was reading a file. He did not look up immediately. He let me stand there for a moment, absorbing the room, absorbing the power he projected without saying a word. Then, he closed the file and looked at me. "You kept the receipt," he stated. It was not a question. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled receipt. I walked forward and placed it on his desk. $24.50, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "You owe my stepfather a tip." Whitlock's mouth twitched. It was almost a smile, but not quite. "I owe Wade Rivera nothing," he said calmly. "He sees people as dollar signs. I see people as assets. There is a difference. Sit down, Miss Rivera." I sat in the leather chair opposite him. It was soft and swallowed me up. "Why am I here?" I asked. "And what did the note mean?" Whitlock leaned back, lacing his fingers together. I own a company called Whitlock Haven Hospitality, he began. We own 40 luxury properties across the globe, resorts in the Maldives, boutique hotels in Paris, and the Harborcrest Hotel here in Houston. I nodded slowly. I had heard of the Harborcrest. It was the place where celebrities stayed when they came to town. I do not hire my management trainees from Ivy League schools, Miss Rivera. He continued. I find that business schools teach people how to read spreadsheets, but they do not teach them how to read people. They do not teach them how to remain calm when a tray of drinks is about to collapse, or how to maintain dignity when a customer is screaming in their face. He paused, his blue eyes drilling into me. I scout talent in the real world. I look for survivors. I look for people who can handle pressure because they have had no other choice. I watched you yesterday. You have instincts I cannot teach. He slid a folder across the desk. This is an offer of employment, he said. You would start in our premium service division. Essentially, you would be handling our most high-value guests. If you survive 6 months, you enter the executive management track at the Harborcrest. I opened the folder. My eyes scanned the page. When I saw the starting salary, my breath caught in my throat. It was a number that looked like a mistake. It was more money in a year than Wade and Darla made in 5. It included health insurance, dental, a housing allowance. I stammered. This is crazy. You want to pay me this much to be a waitress? No, he said sharply. I want to pay you that much to be my eyes and ears, to solve problems before they happen, to be invisible until you are needed, and indispensable when you are. I looked at the number again. This was my ticket out. This was the escape hatch I'd been praying for. I could leave the diner. I could leave the smell of grease. I could leave the guilt trips. But then, the skepticism crept back in. It was too perfect. Why me, I asked. There are thousands of waitresses in Texas who can balance a tray. Why did you pick me? Whitlock went still. The air in the room seemed to tighten. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. He looked at my hands, which were resting on my lap. Specifically, he looked at my left wrist. I was wearing a cheap silver watch with a wide band. I always wore it. I never took it off in public. He pointed a finger at my wrist. On your left wrist, he said softly. Under that watch, there is a scar. My blood ran cold. I instinctively covered my left wrist with my right hand. Excuse me, I whispered. A scar, he repeated, shaped like a crescent moon with a jagged tail. You have had it since you were little. Correct, I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Panic was rising in my chest, hot and fast. How do you know that I demanded? My voice was shaking. I have never told anyone about that, not even my friends. Only Darla and Wade knew. And they only knew because they had seen it when I was a baby. I had hidden it my whole life. It was ugly. A raised keloid mark that looked like I had been branded. Whitlock did not stand up. He remained seated, watching my reaction with that same clinical intensity. Sit down. Brooklyn, he said. I am leaving, I said, backing toward the door. You are stalking me. This is sick. I am not stalking you, he said, his voice dropping to a low, commanding register. I am offering you a chance to understand who you are. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the desk next to the job offer. This is a non-disclosure agreement, he said. It states that anything you see, hear, or learn within this house or my company remains strictly confidential. I stopped moving. My hand was on the doorknob. Why would I sign that, I asked. Because you want to know how I know about the scar, he answered, and because deep down, you have always known that the story of your life has missing pages. I stared at him. He was right. I had always felt it, a sense of displacement, a feeling that I was a puzzle piece jammed into the wrong box. I walked back to the desk slowly. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked at the NDA. Then I looked at the job offer. Then I looked at the man who knew the secret of my skin. If I sign this, I said, you will tell me the truth. He picked up a heavy fountain pen and held it out to me. I will tell you enough to start, he said. But I will warn you, Brooklyn, the truth is not a gift. It is a weapon. He looked me dead in the eye, and his next words sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. If you want the truth, you will need to survive the storm it brings. I took the pen. My hand was trembling, but I signed my name. The Harbor Crest Hotel did not smell like canola oil. It smelled of white tea, bamboo, and the terrified sweat of 300 employees trying to remain invisible. Transitioning from the Gulfview Grill to the Harbor Crest was like stepping out of a go-kart and into the cockpit of a fighter jet. At the diner, the rule was simple. Get the food to the table before it gets cold. Here, the rule was the platinum standard. Every movement was choreographed. Every phrase was scripted. We did not say no. We said, "Allow me to explore an alternative for you." We did not fix problems. We curated solutions. My official title was Guest Experience Associate. But that was just corporate speak for a problem solver in a tailored suit. The uniform was sharp, a navy blazer, a pencil skirt, and a silk scarf tied with a knot that took me 3 YouTube tutorials to master. The work was brutal, but not in the way digging ditches is brutal. It was a mental siege. I had to memorize the preferences of 200 VIP guests. Mr. Henderson in Suite 402 is allergic to feather pillows. Mrs. Roth in the penthouse requires her coffee at exactly 6:15 in the morning, and it must be at 180 degrees. But the hardest part wasn't the work. It was the target painted on my back. Graham Whitlock had set me up with a corporate apartment and a car service. Every morning, a black sedan dropped me off at the employee entrance. I tried to tell the driver to stop a block away, but he refused, citing Mr. Whitlock's protocols. So, every morning, I stepped out of a luxury car in front of line cooks and housekeepers who had taken 2 buses to get to work. They hated me. I didn't blame them. In the locker room, conversations would die the second I walked in. I heard the whispers. "Here comes the princess." Someone would mutter, "I heard she didn't even interview. Must be nice to have a sugar daddy on the board." I kept my head down. I focused on the knot in my scarf. I told myself I was there to work, not to make friends. But the isolation stung. My direct manager was a man named Derek Shaw. Derek was in his late 40s, with hair so gelled it looked bulletproof, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He was the director of guest services, and he looked at me like I was a ticking bomb he couldn't defuse. On my 3rd day, he pulled me into his office. It was a glass box overlooking the lobby, designed so he could see everything. "You are doing well." "Rivera," Derek said, tapping a pen on his desk. "Surprisingly well." "Thank you, sir," I said. He leaned forward. His eyes were hard. "Let us cut the corporate act for a second. I have been in this industry for 20 years. I started as a bellhop. I clawed my way up. You walked in off the street into a senior associate role because the chairman made a phone call." He paused, waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. "I'm not saying you are incompetent," he continued, "but in this building, you are a ghost. You have no history, no references, just a direct line to Graham Whitlock. So I have to ask, are you actually good at this job? Or are you just protected?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I survived 10 years of lunch rushes at a tourist trap in Galveston with a broken AC and a fryer that caught fire once a week. Mr. Shaw, I can handle a missing towel in a penthouse." Derek stared at me for a long moment. Then, he gave a short, dry laugh. "We will see," he said. "We have the Tech Energy Gala tonight. 500 guests, senators, oil tycoons. If you survive that without running crying to Mr. Whitlock, I might stop checking your timesheets." I didn't run crying. I ran the floor. The gala was a nightmare wrapped in silk. At 7 o'clock, the main ballroom was a sea of tuxedos and gowns. The air was thick with perfume and ego. I was stationed at the VIP concierge desk, handling last-minute requests. At 8:30, disaster struck. A frantic server came running up to me. Her face was pale. The seating chart. She hissed. The tablet crashed. "We don't know where the senator's wife is supposed to sit, and she is walking in right now." I looked at the digital display. It was black. The backup system was rebooting, which would take 5 minutes. 5 minutes was an eternity. I didn't panic. I didn't call Derek. I remembered the briefing packet I had memorized in the car that morning. Senator Vance, table 12, next to the crude oil lobbyist but away from the renewable energy CEO. I walked straight onto the floor. I intercepted the senator's wife with a glass of champagne before she could even look for her name card. "Mrs. Vance," I said, smiling like she was my oldest friend. "You look stunning. The senator is already asking for you. We have reserved the best seat in the house, right by the center floral arrangement. Allow me." I guided her to table 12, smooth as water. She never knew the system was down. She never knew she was seconds away from a diplomatic incident. By the end of the night, I had reorganized the coat check line to cut wait times by 50%, caught a busboy trying to sneak out with a bottle of expensive scotch, and personally walked a drunk oil tycoon to his limo before he could start a fight. When the lights came up at 2 in the morning, Derek Shaw walked past me. He didn't smile. He didn't high-five me, but he nodded. "Good save on table 12, he said. That was all I got. It was enough. But while I was winning small battles on the floor, the war was starting upstairs. I met Cameron Whitlock on a Tuesday. I was in the elevator, holding a stack of files. When the doors opened on the executive floor, a man stepped in. He was in his mid-30s, handsome in a way that money buys. He had Graham's jawline, but his eyes were different. Graham's eyes were cold but sharp. Cameron's eyes were just empty and cruel. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my parents' house. He looked at the files in my hand, then at my badge. "Brooklyn Rivera." He read aloud. His voice was smooth, like expensive bourbon. I stiffened. "Good morning, Mr. Whitlock." He didn't return the greeting. He just looked me up and down, a smirk playing on his lips. "So, you are the project," he said. "I beg your pardon, my uncle's project," he clarified. "The stray he picked up from the coast, I must say. The reports are impressive. You are quite the little worker bee." I tightened my grip on the files. "I'm just doing my job." "Sir?" He laughed. It was a soft, dismissive sound. "Job. Right. Let's call it that. Just a piece of advice. Brooklyn. My grandfather is getting old. He gets sentimental. He picks up hobbies. Sometimes it is antique cars. Sometimes it is people. But he always gets bored." The elevator doors opened on the lobby level. Cameron stepped out, then paused and looked back over his shoulder. "Enjoy the ride while it lasts. The fall is a long way down." He walked away, leaving me standing in the open elevator, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration of war. He knew I didn't belong, and he was counting the minutes until he could prove it. But the strangest part of my new life wasn't the enemies, it was the dinners. Once a week, like clockwork, Graham Whitlock summoned me. Not to his office, not to a boardroom. He invited me to dinner at the hotel's private rooftop restaurant. We would sit at a secluded table, surrounded by the glittering Houston skyline. The food was incredible truffle risotto, Wagyu beef, things I couldn't even pronounce. But we never talked about the food. We never talked about the hotel. We never talked about Cameron. "Tell me about your 6th birthday," he asked one night, cutting his steak with surgical precision. I paused, my fork hovering. "My 6th birthday, I think we went to the boardwalk. Wade bought me a funnel cake." "Do you remember the hospital where you were born?" he asked another time. "No," I said. "I was born at home." That is what Darla always said. "A midwife delivered me." He would nod, his face unreadable, cataloging every answer. He asked about medical history. He asked if I had any recurring dreams. He asked if I had ever felt like I was being watched as a child. It felt less like a conversation and more like a deposition. He was building a profile. He was checking boxes on a list only he could see. One night, after a particularly grueling dinner where he had asked about my blood type, I went back to the employee office to finish some paperwork. It was late, almost midnight. The hotel was quiet. I needed to update my direct deposit information in the HR portal. I logged into the system, navigating through the employee database. My profile popped up on the screen. Name Brooklyn Rivera ID 94852 Department Guest Services. I scrolled down, just idly checking the data. My eyes stopped at the bottom of the page, at the metadata stamp. Profile created. June 12, 2025. Created by Executive Office Override. I froze. June 12th. I pulled out my phone and checked the calendar. I scrolled back. Graham Whitlock had walked into the Gulf View Grill on July 15th. My profile in the Harbor Crest system had been created a full month before he ever sat in my section. A month before the $0 tip. A month before he tested me with the receipt. I felt a cold chill wash over me. The noise of the server room fans seemed to get louder. He hadn't found me by accident. He hadn't been impressed by my service that day. The entire thing, the lunch, the stare down, the note. It was theater. He had come to Galveston to collect me. I had been hired before he even ordered his ice water. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. I needed to talk to Jessa. I called her from the stairwell, my voice echoing against the concrete walls. Jessa, you need to wake up, I whispered. It is 1 a.m. Brooklyn, she groaned. Unless you killed someone, this better be good. He knew. I said, he knew who I was before he came to the diner. My file was created in June. Jessa, he didn't stumble upon me. He hunted me. There was silence on the other end. Then, the sound of rustling sheets. Okay, Jessa said, her voice sharp and awake now. I have been doing some digging too, since you told me about the scar. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. But Brooklyn, listen to me. I leaned my head against the cold concrete wall. What did you find? I went through the archives of the Houston Chronicle, she said. I searched for Graham Whitlock. Not the business articles, the personal ones, old society pages. And there was a scandal about 30 years ago, Jessa said. A massive family dispute over a trust fund. Graham's son Cameron's father died in a boating accident, but there was a second branch of the family. Graham had a daughter. I held my breath. A daughter. Yes, she was the favorite. But she vanished. The story was that she ran off with a nobody, got disowned. The usual rich girl rebellion drama. But here's the thing. Brooklyn. She was pregnant when she left. The hallway seemed to spin. There was a lawsuit later, Jessa continued, her voice rushing now. A dispute about the Whitlock Legacy Trust. Apparently, the trust documents say that the inheritance skips a generation. It doesn't go to the children, it goes to the firstborn grandchild. I closed my eyes. Cameron is the grandson, Jessa said. But if that daughter had a child, if that baby survived, then Cameron isn't the only heir, I whispered. Exactly, Jessa said. And there was a rumor that the daughter didn't just run away, a rumor that she died in childbirth in a sketchy clinic somewhere near the coast, and the baby was lost to the system. I looked down at my left wrist. I traced the shape of the scar under my watch band. The crescent moon, Brooklyn Jessa asked. Are you there? I am here, I said. The $0 tip. I said, my voice trembling. He wrote, your tip is the truth. He wasn't testing your work ethic, Brooke, Jessa said softly. He was testing your desperation. He needed to know if you were hungry enough to take the bait. He needed to bring you close without alerting Cameron. I hung up the phone. I sat on the stairs for a long time. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. I wasn't just a waitress who got lucky. I wasn't just a project. I was a ghost story. I was the walking, breathing resurrection of a secret that Graham Whitlock had buried 30 years ago. And Cameron wasn't just being a jerk in the elevator. He was sniffing out a predator. He sensed a threat to his territory, even if he didn't know its name yet. Graham Whitlock didn't bring me here to serve drinks. He brought me here to start a war. And I had walked right onto the battlefield without even knowing I was holding a weapon. The folder I had seen on the computer screen was burning a hole in my mind. The date of its creation, June 12th, was the smoking gun. Graham Whitlock had not stumbled upon a diamond in the rough at a roadside diner. He had come to collect me. The next time I was summoned to his estate in River Oaks, I did not wait for him to pour the wine or ask about my childhood. I walked into his study. the heavy oak doors closing behind me with a seal-like thud, and I remained standing. "You knew," I said. My voice was tight, vibrating with a mix of anger and fear. "I saw my file in the HR database. It was created a month before you ever walked into the Gulfview Grill. You did not hire me because I saved a tray of drinks. You hired me because you were hunting me." Whitlock was sitting in his leather armchair by the fireplace. He did not look surprised. He did not look guilty. He looked tired. The shadows under his eyes seemed deeper than usual, the lines around his mouth more etched. He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "I told you, Brooklyn, the truth is a storm. I am not sitting." I snapped. "I want to know why you lied. I want to know why you played that game with the $0 tip. I want to know who I really am to you, because I am done being a project." Whitlock reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a small rectangular photograph. It was old. The edges were yellowed and soft. The gloss faded by time. He placed it on the low table between us. "Face up. Look at the wrist," he said softly. I stepped forward, reluctant but compelled. The photo was a candid shot, taken perhaps 30 years ago. It showed a young woman laughing. She was beautiful, with dark hair that fell in loose waves around her face. She was holding a baby, an infant no more than a few months old. The woman's hand was cradling the baby's head, and on her wrist was a silver bracelet. I leaned closer. The bracelet was unique. It was a chain of small, interlocking charms. One of the charms was caught in the light. It was a crescent moon with a jagged tail. My hand flew to my own wrist, covering the scar I had hidden for 33 years. The shape was identical. The scar was not a birthmark. It was an injury, a brand left by metal pressing too hard into soft, infant skin. "That is my daughter, Evelyn," Whitlock said. His voice broke, just for a splinter of a second, before he hardened it again. "And that baby is the child she had before she was erased from this family." I stared at the woman in the photo. I looked for myself in her face. I saw the same chin, the same brow. "No," I whispered, backing away. "No, this is a trick. I have a mother. Her name is Darla. I have a father. His name is Wade. I have a birth certificate. You have a piece of paper that was bought for $5,000 from a broker in 1992. Whitlock stated. He did not raise his voice. He spoke with the flat, brutal cadence of a judge reading a verdict. My daughter did not run away. Brooklyn, she was struggling. She was vulnerable. She sought help outside the family because she was proud and because she was afraid of my judgment. She entered a facility that promised support for young mothers. Instead, they specialized in redistribution. He stood up then, leaning heavily on his cane. They told us the baby died. They told us there were complications. By the time we investigated, the facility was closed. The records were burned. The staff had vanished. For 30 years, I believed my granddaughter was dead. He looked at me. His eyes were wet. But then, 6 months ago, a private investigator found a thread, a nurse who wanted to clear her conscience before she died. She gave us a list of names. Not the names of the children, but the names of the people who bought them. He took a step toward me. One of the couples on that list was Wade and Darla Rivera of Galveston, Texas. I felt the room tilting. I grabbed the back of the leather chair to steady myself. "That is a lie," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "It is a coincidence." "Is it?" he asked. "Look at the scar." "Brooklyn, that bracelet was a custom piece. I designed it for Evelyn myself. You were wearing it when you were taken. It must have dug into your arm." I shook my head. Denial was a reflex. It was the only thing keeping me from shattering. "I want proof." I said, "Real proof. Not stories, not photos." Whitlock nodded. He pressed a button on his desk phone. "I expected that," he said. The study door opened. 2 people walked in. They were not servants. They were doctors, wearing white coats and carrying medical cases. 2 independent laboratories, Whitlock explained. One is the head of genetics at the medical center. The other is from a private forensic firm in Switzerland. They will take samples now. They will process them separately. Neither knows the other is testing you. I looked at the needles. I looked at Whitlock. If I do this, I said, and it comes back negative, I walk away. I keep the job. I keep the money. But you never speak to me about this again. And if it comes back positive, he asked. I swallowed hard. Then I listen. The next 48 hours were a blur of anxiety. I went to work. I smiled at guests. I dealt with a flooded bathroom on the 4th floor and a lost poodle in the lobby. But my mind was in that study. I looked at myself in the mirror in the employee restroom, tracing my features. Did I look like Darla? I had always assumed I took after a distant relative. I was taller than her. My eyes were different. On Friday evening, I was summoned back. The doctors were gone. It was just Whitlock and a thick envelope sitting on the desk. He did not make me wait. He handed me the envelope. "Read it," he said. I tore open the seal. My hands were shaking so bad I almost ripped the paper inside. I pulled out 2 documents. They were full of charts, markers, and Alleel's scientific jargon I did not understand. But I understood the summary at the bottom of both pages. Probability of paternity, grandpaternity, 99.99. Conclusion, biological relationship confirmed. The paper slipped from my fingers and drifted to the floor. I sank into the chair. The air left my lungs. It was true. The grease, the diner, the endless demands for money from Wade, the guilt trips from Darla. It was all built on a lie. They hadn't saved me. They had bought me. And for 30 years, they had watched me serve them, knowing I should have been sitting on a throne, not scrubbing a fryer. I felt a scream building in my throat, but it came out as a sob. Whitlock moved around the desk. He did not hug me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and warm. "I am sorry," he said. "I am sorry I did not find you sooner." I wiped my face aggressively. I did not want his pity. I wanted answers. The tip. I choked out. "Why the $0 tip? Why the note? If you knew, why didn't you just come to me? Why did you make me serve you?" Whitlock moved back to his chair. He sat down and looked at me with a gaze that was terrifyingly sharp. Because blood is biology. Brooklyn. But character is choice. He steepled his fingers. "I needed to know who you were, not whose DNA you carried, but who you were. If I had walked in there and handed you a check for $1 million, told you were an heiress, what would you have done? Would you have taken the money and run? Would you have quit your job and become another useless socialite like Cameron?" He paused. "I tested you. I pushed you. I watched you handle pressure. I watched you handle disrespect. When I left you $0, I wanted to see if you would chase me down and make a scene. I wanted to see if you were petty, but you weren't. You kept your dignity. And when you found the note, you didn't sell it. You didn't show it to the tabloids. You came to find the truth." He leaned forward. "I needed to know if you were strong enough, because the family you are entering is not a sanctuary. It is a shark tank." I looked at him, confused. I thought the hard part was over. I said, "I thought finding out was the storm." Whitlock shook his head slowly. A grim smile touched his lips. "No, my dear, finding out was just the rain. The storm is Cameron." He opened a drawer and pulled out a leather-bound document. It looked ancient and official. "Everyone thinks Cameron is the heir," Whitlock said. "He sits on the board. He acts like he owns the city. He believes that when I die, the Whitlock Haven Empire becomes his personal playground." He tapped the document, but Cameron is forgetting the terms of the original family trust. My father was a superstitious man. He did not trust sons. He believed sons became lazy. He set up the voting rights to pass to the eldest grandchild of the direct line. My eyes widened. Evelyn was my firstborn. Whitlock said, "You are her firstborn." He let the words hang in the air. "You are not just a beneficiary. Brooklyn, you are the trustee. You hold the voting majority. If Cameron wants to sell a hotel, he needs your signature. If he wants to appoint a CEO, he needs your permission. If he wants to raid the pension fund to pay for his gambling debts, which he is currently trying to do, he needs you to say yes." I stared at him. The weight of what he was saying was crushing. "Does he know?" I asked. "He suspects." Whitlock said, "He knows there is a threat. He knows I've been looking for you. That is why he hates you. He doesn't know for sure that you are the one, but he is terrified that you might be. Whitlock's face hardened. He looked like a general preparing for a final stand. Cameron has been siphoning money. Brooklyn. He is leveraging the company against itself. He is weak, and he is greedy. If he takes control, he will dismantle everything I built. He will destroy the livelihoods of 20,000 employees. He pointed at me. I did not bring you here just to give you a surname. I brought you here to save the company. I brought you here to stop him. I stood up. I felt dizzy. I was a waitress. I knew how to balance a checkbook. Not a multinational corporation. I can't fight him. I said, he is powerful. He has lawyers. He has the board. You have me, Whitlock said fiercely. And you have the truth. And you have something Cameron never had. You know what it means to work for $1. You know the value of the people who change the sheets and scrub the floors. He stood up and walked over to me. He looked me in the eye. When this news breaks, Brooklyn, they will come for you. Cameron will paint you as a fraud. The press will call you a gold digger. They will say you manipulated a senile old man. You will hear people call you a thief 1,000 times a day. He placed his hands on my shoulders. But remember this, you are not taking anything that isn't yours. The real thief is sitting in the boardroom right now, wearing a $3,000 suit, waiting for me to die so he can pick the carcass clean. Are you ready to go to war? Brooklyn. I looked down at the DNA results on the floor. I thought about Wade and Darla, counting my tips. I thought about Cameron in the elevator, telling me the fall was a long way down. I thought about the scar on my wrist, the mark of a life that was stolen from me before I could even speak. I looked up at my grandfather. I picked up the papers. I folded them neatly. I am not going to war. I said, my voice steady for the first time. I am going to work. Tell me what I need to do. Driving back to Galveston felt like driving backward in time. The sleek, air-conditioned silence of the Whitlock estate faded into memory, replaced by the humid, salty grit of the coast. When I pulled into the gravel lot of the Gulfview Grill, the smell hit me first. It was that familiar, suffocating mixture of old fryer oil and low tide. For 33 years, that smell had meant home. Now, it smelled like a crime scene. I walked through the back door. The kitchen was in its usual state of controlled chaos. The dishwasher was leaking, and the line cook was shouting about a shortage of shrimp. I walked past them, straight into the small, cramped office where Wade and Darla were counting the lunch receipts. They looked up when I entered. For a second, I saw relief on their faces. Then, I saw the calculation. They were scanning my clothes, looking for signs of wealth, looking for the payoff. You are back, Wade said, leaning back in his creaky chair. We thought you might have run off with the circus. How is the billionaire? Did he cut you a check? I did not sit down. The office was cluttered with stacks of invoices and yellowing calendars. It felt smaller than I remembered. I need to ask you something, I said, and I need you to tell me the truth for the first time in my life. Darla nervously smoothed her apron. Her eyes darted to Wade, then back to me. Don't start with the drama. Brooklyn, she said, her voice thin. We have a dinner rush coming in 2 hours. Just tell us the good news. Did you get the job? What is the salary? We are behind on the supplier payments. And if you could, where is my birth certificate? I interrupted. The room went deadly silent. The hum of the freezer in the next room seemed to get louder. Wade's eyes narrowed. He picked up a pen and started clicking it. Click, click, click. We told you, he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. It was lost in the flood of 98. The county records were a mess. Why are you asking about this now? I want to know which hospital I was born in, I said, keeping my voice steady. You said it was a home birth. You said a midwife delivered me. What was her name? Darla looked at the floor. She could not meet my gaze. It was 30 years ago. Brooklyn, she mumbled. I don't remember her name. Mrs. something, Smith, maybe. Why does it matter? You are here, aren't you? You are healthy. It matters, I said. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out the envelope Graham Whitlock had given me. I did not open it. I just slammed it down on the desk, right on top of their precious receipts. It matters because I took a DNA test. Darla flinched as if I had slapped her. Her face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. She reached out and gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles white. Wade, however, did not look scared. He looked furious. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the linoleum. "That old man is a snake," Wade spat. His face was turning red, a vein throbbing in his neck. "He is manipulating you. Brooklyn, don't you see it? He is lonely and he is rich, and he wants to steal a daughter because he lost his own. He is filling your head with lies to turn you against your family." "He is not stealing me," I said, my voice rising. "He is the only one who has been honest with me. The test was done by 2 independent labs. Wade, I am not a Rivera. I never was." Wade slammed his hand on the desk. "We raised you," he shouted. "We put clothes on your back. We fed you. We gave you a roof over your head when we barely had enough for ourselves. That makes us your family. Biology doesn't mean a thing compared to 30 years of sacrifice." I looked at them. I looked at the fear in Darla's eyes and the rage in Wade's. And then, the mask slipped. Darla looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. But her next words were not about love. They were not about losing a daughter, if you are really one of them. She sniffed, wiping her nose. "Then you are rich now, right? You are a Whitlock. They have billions." I stared at her, stunned. "Think about what we did for you," Darla continued, her voice taking on a wheedling, desperate tone. "We saved you from the system. If we hadn't taken you, who knows where you would have ended up? You owe us. Brooklyn, the grill is going under. We need $50,000 to fix the roof and pay the back taxes. If you are going to leave us for them, the least you can do is write a check." I felt a cold hollowness open up in my chest. It was a physical pain, sharp and deep. They were not afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing their investment. I was not a daughter to them. I was a retirement plan that had just decided to walk away. "You don't care that I know," I whispered. "You just care if the money stops." Wade crossed his arms. He looked at me with cold, hard eyes. "You are being ungrateful," he said. "We are business people. Brooklyn, we made a deal a long time ago. We held up our end. We raised you. Now you have hit the jackpot. Share the wealth. It is only fair." I grabbed the envelope from the desk. "I am not your business partner," I said, "and I am done being your cash cow." I turned and walked out. Wade was yelling something behind me, something about loyalty and ungrateful children. But I didn't stop. I walked straight to my car, my hands shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove straight to Jessa's house. I needed sanity. I needed someone who didn't see me as a dollar sign. Jessa was waiting for me. She had a laptop open on her kitchen table and a pot of strong coffee brewing. She took one look at my face and poured me a mug without saying a word. "They admitted it," she asked, sitting down opposite me. "Basically," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. They pivoted to asking for money within 2 minutes. It was transactional. Jessa. It was like I was a bad investment they were trying to salvage. Jessa reached out and squeezed my hand. "I am sorry. Brooke." She turned the laptop around. "I have been digging while you were gone," she said. I looked into the adoption laws in Texas from the early 90s. It was the Wild West back then. There were these private agencies that operated in the gray areas. I found one called New Horizons Family Services. I looked at the screen. It was a scanned image of an old newspaper clipping. They were shut down in 1996 for fraud and human trafficking, Jessa explained. But before they closed, they specialized in private placements for wealthy families looking to avoid questions, or, in some cases, wealthy families looking to dispose of a problem. She pointed to a name in the article. The director of the agency was a woman named Martha Greaves. I did a deep search on her. Jessa said, "She died 10 years ago. But I found a list of her known associates. One of them was a lawyer who handled the paperwork for the Rivera adoption. It was confirmation. It was the final nail in the coffin of my childhood. I need to know the money trail. I said, Whitlock said they were bought. I need to prove it. Jessa nodded. There is one person who might know. Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins had been the bookkeeper for the Gulfview Grill for 20 years before she retired. She was ancient, living in a small bungalow on the other side of the island. She had always liked me. She used to sneak me candy when I was a kid, waiting for Darla's shift to end. We went to see her an hour later. She was sitting on her porch, surrounded by cats. She squinted at me through thick glasses. Brooklyn, she rasped. Lord, child, you look like you have seen a ghost. I sat on the steps beside her. Mrs. Higgins, I need to ask you about the books. From 1992, the year I was born. She frowned, her wrinkled hands stroking a gray cat. 1992. That was a hard year. The oil bust was still hurting everyone. The grill was nearly bankrupt. Wade was talking about selling the fryers. And then I prompted, and then a miracle happened, she said, her eyes drifting to the horizon, or that is what Wade called it. Around November of that year, suddenly, there was cash. How much cash, I asked. A lot, she said. Enough to pay off the banknote. Enough to replace the roof. I remember asking Wade where it came from. I was the bookkeeper. I needed to know how to log it. What did he say? He told me to log it as consulting revenue. She chuckled dryly. Consulting. Wade Rivera couldn't consult his way out of a paper bag. But he was the boss. I did what I was told. But I remember the deposit slip. It was a cashier's check. $50,000. $50,000 in 1992. That was a fortune. It was the price of a house. It was the price of me. I thanked Mrs. Higgins and walked back to Jessa's car. I felt sick, but I also felt clean. The truth was ugly, but it was solid. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I was a product that had been sold to cover a bad debt. I went back to the grill one last time. It was late now. The dinner rush was over. Wade and Darla were cleaning up. I walked in the front door. They looked up. Hopeful again. They probably thought I had come back to write that check. I spoke to Mrs. Higgins. I said, I know about the $50,000. Darla dropped a stack of plates. They shattered on the floor. A loud, jagged crash that echoed through the empty diner. Wade stopped wiping the counter. His face went from red to a dangerous, pale white. You are digging graves. Brooklyn, he warned. I am digging up the truth. I corrected. You didn't adopt me out of the kindness of your hearts. You were paid. You were paid to take a problem away from a wealthy family, and you used that money to save this restaurant. Darla started to cry again. But this time it was different. It was the weeping of someone who had been caught. We loved you, she sobbed. We did love you. The money was just we had to survive. I looked at her. I believed that, in her own twisted way. She did love me. But she loved her survival more. I am leaving, I said. I am moving to Houston. I am taking the job. And I am taking my life back. Do not contact me. Do not ask me for money. I turned to go. If you walk out that door, Wade's voice boomed, stopping me in my tracks. If you walk out and leave us with nothing, I will go to the press. I turned back slowly. Excuse me, I will call the Houston Chronicle, Wade said, a sneer curling his lip. I will tell them everything, but not your version. I will tell them that the poor waitress from Galveston seduced a senile billionaire. I will tell them you abandoned your sick, elderly parents who sacrificed everything for you. I will paint you as the biggest gold digger in Texas history. He took a step toward me. How will that look to your new fancy friends? How will that look to the board of directors? You think they will accept you when you are splashed all over the tabloids as a fraud? I looked at him. I saw the desperation, but I also saw the malice. He was willing to destroy me if he couldn't own me. I pulled out my phone. I held it up. The screen was glowing, recording. I said, Wade froze. Texas is a one-party consent state. Wade, I said, my voice cold and hard like steel. I have recorded this entire conversation. I have Mrs. Higgins willing to testify about the $50,000. I have the DNA results. And now, I have you on tape attempting to blackmail me. I took a step toward him, and for the first time in my life, he looked small. "If you go to the press," I said, "I will release this recording. I will sue you for fraud. I will sue you for intentional infliction of emotional distress. And I will have the IRS audit every single tax return this diner has filed since 1992. I stared him down. "Do we have an understanding?" Wade swallowed. He didn't speak. He just nodded, looking down at the counter. I looked at Darla. She was sobbing into her apron, unable to look at me. "Goodbye," I said. I walked out of the Gulf View Grill. The air outside was heavy and hot, but as I walked toward my car, I took a deep breath. It tasted of salt and freedom. I drove away without looking back, leaving the smell of grease and the weight of their lies in the rearview mirror. I was done being Brooklyn Rivera, the waitress. I was ready to find out who I was supposed to be. The war did not start with a scream. It started with a notification chime. At 8 o'clock on Monday morning, 3 days after I had walked away from my family in Galveston, my work email pinged. It was not a calendar invite. It was a forward from an anonymous internal address, sent to the entire executive floor of Whitlock Haven Hospitality. The subject line read, "The liability in the executive suite." I clicked it open. My stomach dropped to the floor. It was a dossier. It contained photos of me serving tables at the Gulf View Grill, looking sweaty and exhausted. It had a scanned copy of my high school transcript, which was average at best. And then, there was the narrative. It described me not as a trainee, but as a senile man's vanity project. It insinuated that my relationship with Graham Whitlock was inappropriate. It questioned my mental stability, citing sources close to her family who claimed I had delusions of grandeur. Wade, he had not gone to the press yet, but he had clearly found a way to feed information to Cameron. I walked down the hallway toward my office. The atmosphere had shifted. The polite nods from the administrative staff were gone, replaced by averted eyes and hushed whispers. I felt like a virus that had breached the sterile environment of the headquarters. I reached my desk. Derek Shaw was standing there, looking grim. "You need to see the board schedule," he said. Not making eye contact, I looked at the digital display. An emergency meeting had been added for 10 o'clock. The agenda item was single and brutal. Personnel risk assessment and brand integrity. "They are coming for me," I said. Derek nodded. Cameron called it. "He is saying, your presence is damaging the stock price. He says the rumors are spooking the investors." I straightened my blazer. "Let them come." The boardroom was a cavern of glass and polished mahogany. Cameron Whitlock sat at the head of the table, looking like a shark in a three-piece suit. He was surrounded by his faction 3 board members who nodded every time he exhaled. Graham Whitlock was there too. He sat on the right, looking paler than I had ever seen him. His hands were resting on the table, trembling slightly. Cameron did not waste time. "We are facing a crisis of confidence," he began, his voice smooth and projecting false concern. "We are a luxury brand. Our reputation is built on pedigree and excellence. We cannot have our management structure compromised by experimental hiring practices." He slid a file across the table. "Miss Rivera lacks the education, the experience, and the temperament for this role, and now, with these humiliating leaks regarding her background, she has become a liability. I move for immediate termination." I stood up. I did not ask for permission. "My background is not a liability," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "It is the reality of the people who actually run your hotels. I know what it costs to launder a sheet. I know how long it takes to turn a room. You sit in this tower and look at spreadsheets. I look at the work," Cameron sneered. "That is a charming speech for a union rally." "Miss Rivera, but this is a boardroom. We deal in profit, not sentiment." "Enough," Graham Whitlock said. Graham tried to stand. He placed his hands on the table and pushed himself up. "She stays," Graham commanded. His voice was raspy. "As long as I am chairman, she stays. She is more capable than any of you realize. She is suddenly—" Graham stopped. His hand clutched at his chest. His face turned an ashen gray. He swayed, his knees buckling. "Mr. Whitlock," I screamed, rushing toward him. He collapsed back into his chair, gasping for air. The room erupted into chaos. Someone shouted for a medic. Cameron stood up, but he did not look devastated. For a split second, I saw a flash of something else in his eyes. Opportunity. The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. As they wheeled Graham out on a stretcher, he gripped my hand. His skin was cold. "Hold the line," he whispered. Then he was gone. The ambulance sirens fading into the Houston traffic. The meeting was adjourned, but the damage was done. Graham was in the hospital, incapacitated. My shield was gone, and Cameron was now the acting chairman. By Wednesday, the sabotage went from whispers to warfare. I arrived at my office to find Derek waiting for me again. This time, he looked angry. "Did you authorize the cancellation of the Vertex Tech Summit contract?" he asked. I frowned. "What, no? That is our biggest event of the quarter. It is worth $2 million in revenue." Derek spun his laptop around. "An email was sent from your account at 2 o'clock this morning," he said. "It informed the client that we were overbooked and could not honor the reservation. They are furious. They are threatening to sue." I stared at the screen. It was my email signature. It was my phrasing. But I had been asleep at 2 o'clock. I did not send this. I said, "Someone hacked my account." Derek looked skeptical. "It says the login came from your IP address. Brooklyn." I felt the walls closing in. This was not just a smear campaign anymore. This was a frame job. They were manufacturing cause for dismissal. If I lost the job for negligence, I would lose credibility. If I lost credibility, revealing my identity as the heir would look like a desperate lie to save my skin. "I need the server logs." I said, "You need a lawyer," Derek replied. "Cameron has already called legal. He is preparing a motion for gross incompetence." I walked out of the office. I needed air. I needed to think. I took the elevator down to the basement archives, a place where no one went. I sat on a stack of old banquet chairs, my head in my hands. I was fighting a ghost. I could not fight digital signatures and invisible enemies. A door opened. I stiffened, expecting security to escort me out. It was not security. It was Marianne Klein. Marianne was the chief financial officer of Whitlock Haven. She was a woman of steel, known for her sharp bob haircut and her ability to make grown men cry over budget variances. We had never spoken more than 2 words to each other. She walked over and stood in front of me. She was holding a tablet. "You look like you're about to fold," she said. I looked up. They forged my signature. "Marianne, they are deleting me." She nodded. "I know. I saw the timestamps. The email was sent while the security system shows your badge was logged out of the building. But Cameron's IT guys forgot to check the physical access logs." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Marianne sat on a box of files next to me. "I worked for Graham for 20 years. She said, "I respect him. He built this company on service. Cameron thinks this company is his personal ATM. I hate nepotism. Brooklyn, I hate watching entitled boys break things they did not build." She tapped the screen of her tablet. "I have been watching you. You work harder than anyone on that floor. You actually care if the guests are happy. That matters to me." She handed me the tablet. "So, if you are going to fight him, stop using a butter knife. Use a bazooka." I looked at the screen. It was a spreadsheet. Rows and rows of numbers. "What is this?" I asked. Marianne pointed to a highlighted column. "These are vendor payments approved by Cameron over the last 18 months, she explained. "They are going to a company called Aurora Holdings for consulting services and renovation logistics." I scanned the numbers. $50,000 here. $100,000 there. It added up to millions. I checked Aurora Holdings. Marianne said, "The registered address is a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands, but the bank routing numbers, they bounce back to a private account in Houston." "Cameron's account?" I asked. Marianne smiled. A thin, dangerous expression. "Cameron is not smart. Brooklyn, he is just arrogant. He thinks no one checks the small print because everyone is too afraid of him. He is funneling company money into his own pocket to cover his gambling losses." I stared at the data. This was it. This was the weapon. "If we release this," I said, "he goes to jail. If we release this," Marianne corrected, The stock tanks. The board panics. We have to be smart. We cannot just leak it. We need to catch him in the act. We need him to confess. I stood up. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I went to the hospital that night. Graham was awake, but weak. He was hooked up to monitors that beeped in a steady, rhythmic cadence. I sat by his bed. I told him about the forged email. I told him about Marianne. I told him about Aurora Holdings. He closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, there was sadness there, but also resolve. He is my blood. Graham whispered, but he is a cancer to this family. I held his hand. I can stop him. Graham, but I have to destroy his reputation to do it. Graham squeezed my hand. Listen to me. Brooklyn, he rasped. Do not win by becoming them. Do not use rumors. Do not use lies. Do not use the press. He looked at me with intense focus. Win by making it impossible for them to lie. I understood. I went back to the office the next morning. I walked past the staring secretaries. I walked past Derek Shaw. I went straight to my desk and typed an email to the entire board, including Cameron. Subject urgent request for independent audit and operational review. In the email, I stated that due to the recent security breach regarding the Vertex contract, I was exercising my authority as a senior associate to request a full forensic audit of all vendor contracts and digital logs to clear my name. I hit send. 10 minutes later, Cameron stormed into my office. He slammed the door so hard the glass walls rattled. Who do you think you are? He hissed. You do not order audits. You are a waitress. We are about to fire. I looked up at him calmly. If you have nothing to hide, Cameron, an audit will prove I'm incompetent. I said, it will prove I sent that email. Why are you so afraid of a little transparency? He glared at me. His face was flushed. Cancel it, he ordered. Retract the email, or I will make sure you never work in this industry again. I cannot retract it. I lied. I already CC'd the external compliance officer. It is automatic now. Cameron's eyes widened. He knew. He knew that if the auditors looked at the vendor contracts, they would find Aurora Holdings. He backed away. You will regret this, he said. He turned and left. I picked up my phone and called Marianne. He took the bait. I said, now comes the trap. Marianne replied. The trap was set for Friday. The board meeting to decide my fate was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I spent Thursday night with Marianne in the server room. We were not just pulling data, we were setting up a presentation. We linked the security camera footage from the night the email was sent, which showed an empty office with the digital logs. We overlaid the financial transfers to Aurora Holdings, but the final piece was the most important. I needed Cameron to say it. I needed him to admit that the company was his to steal from. I sent him a text message on Friday morning. I know about Aurora. I want a deal. It was risky. If he went to the police, it could look like blackmail. But I knew Cameron. He did not go to the police. He made deals. He replied 3 minutes later, Boardroom B, 12 o'clock, alone. Boardroom B was the smaller conference room. It was soundproof. It was where the dirty deals happened. I walked in at 12 o'clock sharp. Cameron was waiting. He looked tired, manic. How much do you want? He asked. I sat down. I don't want money. Cameron, I want you to resign. He laughed. A harsh barking sound. Resign. You are insane. I am the Whitlock heir. I own this place. You are stealing from this place. I said, $5 million to a shell company. That is embezzlement. He slammed his hand on the table. It is my money, he shouted. It is my family's name on the building. I earned it. I deal with the unions. I deal with the investors. I deal with the old man's slow decline. I deserve every penny. He was shouting now, pacing the room. You think a few spreadsheets scare me? I will bury you. Brooklyn, I will make sure everyone knows you are just a greedy little stray who tricked a dying man. I will, he stopped. I was looking at the smoke detector on the ceiling. A tiny red light was blinking. What are you looking at? He demanded. I looked back at him. I am looking at the new audio-visual system we installed last week. I said. Cameron followed my gaze. He saw the camera lens hidden in the fixture. He saw the red recording light. I stood up. You said win by making it impossible for them to lie. I whispered to myself. The door to the boardroom opened. Marianne walked in. Behind her were two members of the External Audit Committee. Behind them was the head of legal. They had been in the viewing room next door. They had heard everything. They had heard the confession. They had heard the rage. Cameron looked at them. He looked at me. His face went white. This is illegal, he stammered. This is entrapment. It is a quality assurance review, Marianne said, her voice dry as dust. And you just failed. I walked past Cameron. He did not move. He was frozen. A man realizing that the ground he stood on had been gone for a long time. I walked out into the hallway. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I had not used my name. I had not used my DNA. I had used the truth. But as I walked toward the elevators, I knew this was not the end. Cameron was wounded, but he was not dead, and a wounded animal is the most dangerous kind. The audit would take weeks. The legal battle would take months, and in the meantime, he would have one final card to play. He would attack the one thing I had not protected. My history. I checked my phone. There was a missed call from Jessa, and a text. Check the news. Now. I opened the news app. The headline was screaming at me. Secret daughter or con artist, the $1 million lie behind the Whitlock heiress. Wade had gone to the press. The silence in the intensive care unit was heavier than lead. It was a suffocating, pressurized silence, broken only by the rhythmic hissing of the ventilator and the sterile beep of the heart monitor. Graham Whitlock lay in the bed, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. The man who could silence a boardroom with a single glance was now reduced to a fragile network of tubes and wires. His skin was the color of parchment, and his chest rose and fell with a mechanical, forced rhythm. I stood by the window, looking out at the Houston skyline. It was raining, a gray, miserable drizzle that blurred the lights of the city. My phone was vibrating in my pocket, a constant, angry buzz. I did not check it. I knew what it was. It was the world outside exploding. Marianne Klein walked into the room. She looked exhausted. Her sharp bob was slightly disheveled, and she was holding a tablet like a shield. He made the move, she said quietly. Her voice was flat. I turned from the window. Cameron. Marianne nodded. He called an emergency board meeting 20 minutes ago. Since Graham is incapacitated, he invoked Article 42 of the corporate bylaws, emergency succession. He is arguing that Graham's health crisis renders him unfit to govern, and that his recent decisions, meaning hiring you and blocking the audit, were symptoms of cognitive decline. He is locking us out. I said, he is trying to... She corrected. He has suspended your security clearance. Brooklyn. As of this morning. You are barred from the Harbor Crest and the corporate headquarters. He is painting this as a rescue mission. He is the stable hand on the wheel, saving the company from a senile old man and his manipulative protege. I looked at Graham. He was asleep, sedated heavily to protect his heart. He could not fight this. I am not a protege. I said, I am the trustee. Not until the lawyers say you are, Marianne said, and Cameron knows that. He is buying time to shred the evidence. We need to move faster. I left the hospital an hour later. The paparazzi were already camping at the main entrance, so I took the service elevator to the loading dock and slipped out into the rain. I took a cab to my corporate apartment. When I arrived, the concierge looked at me with pity. He did not say a word, just handed me my mail. There was a large manila envelope on top of the stack. It had no return address. It was thick. I went up to my apartment. It felt cold and foreign, like a hotel room I had stayed in too long. I sat on the edge of the beige sofa and tore open the envelope. It was not a bomb. It was worse. Inside was a photocopy of a document from 1992. It was a ledger page from New Horizons Family Services. It was grainy and faded, but the handwriting was legible. Subject female infant 892. Placement Rivera. W. D. Fee $50,000. Notes. Cash transaction, no questions asked, birth record sealed. Attached to the ledger was a single sheet of plain white paper. On it, typed in bold, black letters, was a single sentence. You were bought. I stared at the paper. I did not cry. I think I had run out of tears days ago. Instead, I felt a cold, hard stone settle in my stomach. This was from Cameron. He had dug this up, or maybe he had manufactured it, but the message was clear. He was telling me that I was merchandise. He was telling me that my entire existence was a transaction. My phone rang again. This time, I looked at the screen. Mom. I stared at the word. Mom. It felt like a lie. I answered. Brooklyn Darla's voice was high and jagged, thick with tears. Oh, thank God you answered. It is a nightmare here. Brooklyn. The reporters. They are outside the grill. They are knocking on the windows. Wade is losing his mind. He is talking to them. Brooklyn. He is telling them things. I held the phone to my ear, listening to her panic. I said nothing. You have to help us, she sobbed. They are going to ruin us. Wade says he has to protect his reputation. He says he has to tell his side of the story before you destroy us. I looked down at the ledger page. Fee. $50,000. What do you want? Darla, I asked. My voice was calm. It scared me how calm it was. We need to get away, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. We need to close the grill for a while. Go somewhere until this blows over. But we can't. The bank frozen our business account because of the investigation you threatened. We have no cash. She paused. I could hear her breathing. If you could just send us something, she said, just to help us get out of town. 20,000. That is all. Just $20,000. Brooklyn. You are rich now. It is nothing to you. Wade says if you send the money, he will stop talking to the reporters. He will say it was all a misunderstanding. I closed my eyes. There it was, the price tag. My silence was worth $20,000. My dignity was worth $20,000. For 33 years, I had chased their approval. I had worked double shifts. I had handed over my tips. I had paid their mortgage. I had paid for Wade's truck. I had paid for Darla's dental work. I had paid and paid and paid, thinking that if I just paid enough, eventually I would buy their love. But love is not a subscription service. I opened my eyes. I looked at the rain hitting the window. No, I said. There was a stunned silence on the other end. What Darla whispered. I said no. I repeated, I am not sending you $20,000. I am not sending you $20. But Wade will talk, Darla cried, her voice rising to a shriek. He will destroy you. He will tell them you are ungrateful. He will tell them you abandoned us. Let him talk, I said. Let him tell the world whatever he wants, because I am done paying you to be my parents. Brooklyn, please, you owe us. We raised you. I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of the apartment. I blocked the number. It was not a violent act. It was a surgical one. I had just cut off a gangrenous limb. It hurt, but it was necessary for survival. I stood up. I showered. I put on a fresh suit. I was not going to hide in the apartment. I had a war to fight. Marianne texted me an address. It was an office building downtown, not far from the courthouse. Suite 400. Ainsley Pratt. Be there at 2. Ainsley Pratt did not look like a lawyer. She looked like a librarian who enjoyed silencing people. She was a small woman with graying hair pulled back into a severe bun and glasses that magnified her sharp, intelligent eyes. Her office was not filled with mahogany and leather like Graham's study. It was filled with whiteboards and boxes of files. Sit, Ainsley said, not looking up from a document she was marking with a red pen. I sat. Marianne was already there, pacing by the window. Marianne tells me you are the secret Whitlock heir, Ainsley said, capping her pen, and that Cameron is trying to bury you before the body is even cold. Graham is not dead, I said. To the law. He might as well be. Ainsley retorted. She took off her glasses and looked at me. Listen to me. Miss Rivera, I specialize in estate litigation. I have seen families tear each other apart for a fraction of what is at stake here. Cameron's play is textbook. She stood up and walked to a whiteboard. She wrote 2 phrases in large, black letters: undue influence, identity fraud. He is not just going to attack your claim, Ainsley explained. He is going to attack the timeline. He will argue that you targeted Graham Whitlock, that you, a struggling waitress, found a vulnerable, lonely old man and manipulated him into believing you were his long-lost granddaughter. He will say the DNA test was faked or that the sample was compromised, but the test was independent. I argued. It doesn't matter, Ainsley said. In civil court, he doesn't have to prove you are a fraud beyond a reasonable doubt. He just has to create enough doubt to freeze the assets. He will drag this out for 5 years. He will drain the trust with legal fees while he stays in control of the company. She turned to me, and while he does that in court, he will try you in the media. He will leak stories about your parents. He will leak stories about your debts. He will paint you as a predator. Can you handle that? I thought about the ledger in my apartment. I thought about Wade's blackmail. I have nothing left to hide. I said, my parents sold me for $50,000. Let him print that. Ainsley paused. She looked at me with a flicker of respect. Good, she said, because if we are going to win this, we cannot play defense. We have to prove that Cameron is unfit to serve as trustee. We have to prove the embezzlement. Marianne gave me the data on Aurora Holdings. It is strong, but it is circumstantial until we have the audit results, and Cameron will burn those records before the auditors get in the door. We need something else, Marianne said. We need the kill switch. Graham must have left something. He knew Cameron was dangerous. He wouldn't have left you exposed without a weapon. I shook my head. He gave me the job. He gave me the truth. That is all. Think, Brooklyn. Ainsley commanded. Graham Whitlock was a strategist. He didn't just hand you a legacy, he handed you a puzzle. Is there anything else? Any document? Any safe deposit box? I thought back to the diner. The note. Your tip is the truth. I stood up. I need to go for a drive. I said, where Marianne asked. Back to the start. I said, I drove to Galveston. It was reckless. Perhaps the press was swarming, but I took the back roads. I parked 3 blocks away from the Gulfview Grill and walked through the alley. It was dark now. The grill was closed. The windows were dark. A closed for maintenance sign hung on the door. I peered through the glass. The streetlights cast long shadows across the empty tables. I looked at table 12, the corner booth. I remembered the day Graham Whitlock walked in. I remembered the fear. I remembered the judgment. And I remembered the $0 tip. Why 0, I asked myself. He could have left $100. He could have left a penny. But he left nothing. Your tip is the truth. Wade had called it an insult. I had called it a test. But Graham had said something else. Character is choice. He had stripped away the transaction. He had removed the money from the table to see what remained. I stood there in the dark alley, and I realized something. The note. I still had it. It was in my wallet. I had carried it like a talisman since that day. I pulled it out. The cream paper was soft from wear. I unfolded it under the dim light of a street lamp. No tip. Your tip is the truth. Bring the receipt. I had brought the receipt. I had given it to him, but he had let me keep the note. Why I ran my thumb over the paper. It felt thick, thicker than normal stationery. My heart started to beat faster. I turned around and ran back to my car. I drove back to Houston, breaking the speed limit. I did not go to the apartment. I went to the hospital. I badged into the ICU. The nurses knew me now. They let me pass. Graham was awake. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. He looked frail, hanging on to life by a thread. I walked to the bedside. Graham. I whispered. He turned his head slowly. His blue eyes focused on me. They were cloudy, but the intelligence was still there, burning behind the fog of medication. I went to the grill. I said, I looked at the table. He blinked. A slow, deliberate movement. The note, I said, pulling it from my pocket. You let me keep it. Why Graham's lips moved. His voice was a dry rattle, barely audible over the hiss of the oxygen. Not just an invitation, he wheezed. I leaned closer, my ear inches from his mouth. It is a key, he whispered. He raised a trembling hand and tapped the paper in my hand. Then he tapped it again. Open it, he breathed. Then his eyes closed, and the monitor beeped a little faster as his heart rate spiked from the exertion. The nurse stepped in. You need to let him rest, Miss Rivera. I nodded and backed away. I walked out into the corridor. I held the note under the bright fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway. Open it. I looked at the edge of the paper. It was bonded stationery, heavy stock, but when I looked closely at the corner, I saw a microscopic seam. It wasn't one piece of paper. It was two thin sheets, pressed together with immense pressure. My hands were shaking. I used my fingernail to gently pry at the corner. It separated. There was something in between the layers. I carefully peeled the two sheets apart. It made a soft tearing sound. Hidden between the layers of the stationery, invisible to the naked eye unless you destroyed the note to find it, was a pattern. It was printed in a strange, reflective ink that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't text. It was a sequence of numbers and letters. Vault 7, Row 4, Tip equals L14. And below that, a phrase that made my breath catch in my throat. The shadow ledger. I stared at the dismantled note. Graham hadn't just given me an address. He had given me the combination to a safe, and judging by the name Shadow Ledger, it wasn't full of cash. It was full of the one thing Cameron Whitlock could not bribe, bully, or sue his way out of. It was the proof. Cameron had the board. He had the lawyers. He had the media. He had my parents. But I had the key. I pulled out my phone and texted Marianne and Ainsley. I found it. Meet me at the bank in the morning. I looked back at the door of the ICU. Graham had known this day would come. He had known he might not be there to hand me the weapon himself. So he had hidden it in the first thing he ever gave me. He didn't tip me money. He tipped me the end of Cameron Whitlock. The news of Graham Whitlock's death did not travel like a whisper. It traveled like a shockwave. He passed away at 4:15 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was holding his hand when the heart monitor flatlined, turning its rhythmic beep into a singular, high-pitched tone that signaled the end of an era. I did not have time to mourn. I did not have time to process the loss of the grandfather I had only known for a few weeks, because at 8 o'clock that same morning, 4 hours after the time of death was called, Cameron Whitlock filed a lawsuit in the Harris County District Court. He requested an emergency injunction to freeze the assets of the Whitlock Legacy Trust. He petitioned the court to suspend all voting rights attached to the trust until a competency hearing could be held regarding the mental state of the late Graham Whitlock. It was a declaration of war, signed in black ink. By noon, the world outside the hospital was a circus. I watched from the window of the private waiting room as the satellite trucks lined up along the street. The headlines were already flashing across the tickers on the television screens in the lobby. They were brutal. They were reductive. They were exactly what Cameron had paid for. Waitress turned heiress, the billion-dollar scam from Greasy Spoon to Silver Spoon, who is Brooklyn Rivera family outrage. Whitlock heir calls for investigation into elder abuse. They had taken my life, my struggle, and the truth, and they had twisted it into a caricature. To the world, I was not a lost granddaughter found. I was a predator who had preyed on a dying man. I was Anna Nicole Smith without the charm. I was a villain. I turned away from the window. Marianne Klein was standing by the door, her face pale but set in grim determination. "The funeral is set for Friday," she said, "but the reading of the will is today. Cameron insisted on it. He wants to open the floor before the market closes." I smoothed the front of my black dress. It was a dress I had bought at a discount store 3 years ago for a manager's funeral. It felt cheap against my skin, but it was all I had. "Let us go," I said. The law offices of Pratt & Rowe were located in a glass tower that looked down on the rest of Houston like a judgment. The conference room was vast, with a table long enough to land a plane on. Cameron was already there. He sat at the head of the table, flanked by 3 lawyers who looked like they cost more per hour than I used to make in a year. Cameron did not look like a grieving nephew. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery and was waiting for the check to clear. He did not look at me when I entered. He looked through me. Ainsley Pratt sat at the other end. She gestured for me to sit beside her. Marianne took the seat on my other side. The executor of the estate, a man named Mr. Sterling, cleared his throat. He opened the heavy leather binder in front of him. "I will skip the preamble," Mr. Sterling said, his voice dry. "We are here to address the disposition of the primary voting trust." He adjusted his glasses. "I, Graham Whitlock, being of sound mind and body, hereby revoke all prior beneficiary designations regarding the Whitlock Legacy Trust." Cameron leaned forward. "This was the moment. I hereby designate my granddaughter, Brooklyn Rivera, born Evelyn Whitlock II, as the sole trustee and primary beneficiary, granting her 51% voting control of Whitlock Haven Hospitality." The room went silent. Cameron did not flinch. He did not scream. He simply smiled. There was a catch. There is always a catch. However, Mr. Sterling continued, "Given the circumstances of her discovery, this transfer of power is subject to a probationary period of 60 days. During this time, the beneficiary must submit to a full identity verification and legal audit. If any evidence of fraud, coercion, or undue influence is found, the trust reverts to the secondary beneficiary, Cameron Whitlock." Cameron's smile widened. It was predatory. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Cameron said. He stood up and buttoned his jacket. He looked at me then. His eyes were cold and dead. 60 days. Cameron said softly, "You will not last 60 hours. He walked out of the room, his lawyers trailing behind him like a pack of wolves. "He is right," Ainsley said, packing up her files. "He is not going to wait 60 days. He has already filed for a preliminary hearing to strip you of the title before the probation even starts. We are going to court tomorrow." The courtroom the next day was packed. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. The press gallery was full. I could feel their eyes on the back of my neck, sketching me, judging me. Cameron's lead attorney was a man named Mr. Thorne. He was tall, theatrical, and loud. He paced in front of the judge, a stern woman named Judge Harper, and painted a picture of me that was so horrific I almost believed it myself. "Your Honor," Mr. Thorne boomed, "we have a clear case of elder abuse. Graham Whitlock was 78 years old. He had a history of cardiac issues, and suddenly, in the last month of his life, a waitress from a roadside diner appears, a woman with massive debts, a woman whose own parents describe her as desperate for money. He pointed a finger at me. She isolated him. She manipulated him. She used a forged DNA test to confuse a dying man. We are asking the court to invalidate the will on the grounds of undue influence and identity fraud. We are asking that Mr. Cameron Whitlock be reinstated as the rightful guardian of the company." Judge Harper looked at Ainsley. "Miss Pratt, your response." Ainsley stood up. She did not pace. She did not shout. She walked to the podium with the calm efficiency of an executioner. "Your Honor," Ainsley said, "the plaintiff's entire argument rests on the idea that Graham Whitlock was frail and easily manipulated. We intend to prove that not only was Mr. Whitlock of sound mind, but that he initiated the contact with Miss Rivera, not the other way around." Ainsley motioned to the clerk. "Exhibit A, the DNA results." She projected the documents onto the screen. 2 independent laboratories, Ainsley stated, one in Houston, one in Zurich. Both confirm a 99.9% match. Miss Rivera is not a stranger. She is blood. That proves biology. Mr. Thorne interrupted. "It does not disprove manipulation. She could have found out she was related and used it to extort him." Ainsley smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "Exhibit B," she said. The screen changed. It was a video file. It was Graham. He was sitting in his study, looking at the camera. The timestamp was dated 3 days before he died. Graham Whitlock," he said in the video, his voice weak but clear, "am recording this statement to verify my intent. I have found my granddaughter. I have vetted her. I have tested her. She is not here because she wants my money. She is here because I begged her to save my company from the greed of my nephew." The courtroom murmured. Cameron's face tightened. "He was coached, Mr. Thorne shouted. "Look at him. He is reading off a teleprompter." She wrote the script. Ainsley raised a hand. "If the court pleases," she said, "I would like to call Miss Rivera to the stand to address the timeline of events." I walked to the witness stand. I placed my hand on the Bible. I swore to tell the truth. I sat down. I looked at Cameron. He was glaring at me, trying to intimidate me. But I had faced angry drunks at the diner who were scarier than him. "Miss Rivera," Ainsley asked, "when did you first meet Graham Whitlock?" "July 15th, I said. "He came into the Gulf View Grill. And did you know who he was?" "No." "Did you know you were his granddaughter?" "No." Mr. Thorne stood up. "Objection hearsay. We only have her word for that." I reached into my pocket. "Actually," I said into the microphone, "we have his word." I pulled out the plastic evidence bag containing the receipt and the note. "Your Honor," I said, turning to the judge, "this is the receipt from that lunch. Graham Whitlock left me a tip of exactly $0, and he left this note." I held up the cream-colored paper. "No tip. Your tip is the truth. The date on the receipt is July 15th, I explained. "But if you look at the forensic analysis of this note," Ainsley handed a report to the judge. "The ink on this note was analyzed." I continued. "It matches a pen found in Graham Whitlock's desk. But more importantly, the stationery is from a batch that Graham ordered in June. He wrote this note weeks before he ever walked into the diner." I looked directly at Cameron. "He did not stumble into my diner." I said firmly, "He came there to test me. He knew who I was. I did not manipulate him. He orchestrated this entire meeting. If this was a con, Your Honor, then Graham Whitlock was the con artist, and I was the mark." The judge examined the note. She looked at the date. She looked at Cameron. Mr. Thorne looked flustered. He whispered furiously to Cameron. "This proves nothing," Thorne argued. "It just proves he was obsessed. It proves he was delusional. We have one more witness." "Your Honor," Ainsley said. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A small, elderly man walked in. He walked with a cane, looking terrified. He wore a cheap suit that was 2 sizes too big. "State your name for the record," Ainsley said. "Arthur Vance," the man whispered. "And where did you work between 1990 and 1996? "Mr. Vance. I was a records clerk," he said, "at New Horizons Family Services." The room went deadly quiet. Even Cameron stopped whispering. "Mr. Vance," Ainsley said gently, "did you handle the file labeled Infant 892? Arthur Vance nodded. His hands were shaking. "Yes, ma'am." "And can you tell the court the nature of that transaction?" Vance swallowed hard. He looked at me, his eyes full of shame. "It wasn't an adoption," he said. "Not a legal one. It was a placement, a custom order." "And who paid for this order?" Ainsley asked. "Mr. and Mrs. Rivera," Vance said. "They paid $50,000 in cash." "And did they know the origin of the child?" "Yes," Vance said. "We told them the mother was from a wealthy family and that the child had to disappear. They signed a confidentiality agreement. They knew they were buying a secret, not just a baby." The courtroom erupted. The reporters were typing furiously. Cameron looked like he had been punched in the gut. His narrative about my loving, concerned parents had just been incinerated. They were not concerned parents. They were accomplices to a crime. Judge Harper banged her gavel. "Order, order in this court." She looked at Cameron. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice icy, "your argument for undue influence relies heavily on the testimony of the Rivera family. That testimony is now highly suspect. The evidence suggests that Graham Whitlock was acting to rectify a past wrong, not succumbing to the manipulations of a stranger." She looked at me. "I am inclined to deny the injunction," she said. "The will stands. The probation period will proceed, but Miss Rivera retains her voting rights as trustee effective immediately." Ainsley let out a breath. Marianne squeezed my shoulder. We had done it, but Cameron stood up. "Wait," he shouted. He ignored his lawyer. He reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a single, blue folder. "You want to talk about the past," Cameron yelled, his face red and twisted. "You want to talk about rectifying wrongs." He walked up to the bench. He slammed the folder down in front of the judge. "My grandfather was a romantic," Cameron said, sneering at me. "But he was also a man with a history of mental instability. You saw the video from 3 days ago, but you did not see the medical report from 5 years ago." He turned to the gallery. "Graham Whitlock was diagnosed with early-onset vascular dementia in 2020. Cameron announced. The room gasped. Judge Harper opened the folder. She scanned the pages. Her frown deepened. "This is a certified medical evaluation," Cameron said. "It states clearly that Graham Whitlock lacked the capacity to make complex financial decisions or alter his estate plan as of 5 years ago." He pointed at me, "Which means, Your Honor, that every document he signed after 2020 is void. The will is void. The trust amendment is void." "She is not the trustee. She is nothing." Ainsley stood up, her face pale. "Your Honor, this is an ambush. We have never seen this document. I have seen it." Cameron lied smoothly. "It was in his private medical archives. I tried to protect his dignity. I tried to keep it hidden. But if you force my hand, I will show the world that Graham Whitlock lost his mind long before he found this waitress." Judge Harper looked at the document. She looked at me. The certainty in her eyes was gone. "This changes things," the judge said slowly. "If this medical report is authentic, it predates the will." She banged the gavel. "I am granting a temporary stay on the transfer of power. The court will recess for 72 hours to authenticate this medical report. Until then, the assets remain frozen." Cameron turned to me. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just played an ace when everyone thought the deck was empty. "Welcome to the family. Brooklyn," he whispered as he walked past me. "We played dirty." I stood there, stunned. The victory had been snatched away in seconds. I looked at Ainsley. "Is it real?" I asked. "Did he really have dementia?" Ainsley shook her head. "Graham was sharp as a tack until the end. You know that. I know that. Then it is a forgery," Marianne said. "A damn good one. But we have 72 hours to prove it," Ainsley said, packing her bag frantically. I looked at the blue folder on the judge's bench. "We don't need 72 hours, I said, thinking of the code Graham had left me in the note. "Vault 7, row 4. I looked at Marianne. "We need to get to the bank," I said. Cameron thought he had won with a piece of paper. He didn't know I had the rest of the library. The 72 hours of the court recess felt less like a pause and more like the holding of breath before a gunshot. Cameron Whitlock spent that time giving interviews, standing on the courthouse steps with a sorrowful expression, talking about the tragedy of dementia and the vulnerability of the elderly. He played the part of the grieving, protective nephew to perfection. He thought he had won. He thought the blue medical folder he had slammed onto the judge's bench was the final word. He did not know about the bank vault. The hearing reconvened at 9 o'clock on Friday morning. The courtroom was even more crowded than before. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. There was a charge in the air, the static electricity of a storm about to break. Cameron sat at the plaintiff's table, looking relaxed. He whispered a joke to Mr. Thorne, his lawyer. Behind them, in the front row of the gallery, sat Wade and Darla. They were wearing new clothes, stiff, expensive-looking Sunday best that I suspected Cameron had paid for. They refused to look at me. Judge Harper entered. She looked tired. "We are here to review the authenticity of the medical evidence submitted by the plaintiff," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Mr. Thorne, you may proceed." Thorne stood up. "Your Honor, the medical report is conclusive. Graham Whitlock was diagnosed with vascular dementia 5 years ago. He was legally incompetent. Therefore, the will is void. The trust amendment is void. This entire charade is over." He sat down, smug satisfaction radiating off him like heat. Judge Harper turned to Ainsley Pratt. "Miss Pratt." Ainsley stood up. She did not bring a folder. She brought a heavy, metal banker's box. She placed it on the table with a loud thud that echoed through the room. "Your Honor," Ainsley said, her voice cutting through the silence. "The plaintiff claims Graham Whitlock was incompetent. They claim he did not know what he was doing. They claim he was a victim. She opened the box. We would like to submit new evidence. This evidence was retrieved yesterday morning from a safe deposit box at the First National Bank of Houston. It was accessed using a code hidden within the very note Graham Whitlock left for Brooklyn Rivera at the Gulfview Grill. Cameron frowned. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Ainsley pulled out a flash drive and handed it to the bailiff. "Please play file number 1, she said. The large screens in the courtroom flickered to life. The date stamp in the corner of the video read, October 14th, 2020. The image showed a conference room. Seated at the table was Graham Whitlock. He looked younger, stronger. Sitting across from him were 3 people, a notary public, a high-ranking judge from the appellate court, and Dr. Eris Thorne, one of the leading neurologists in the country. I stared at the screen. Graham spoke. "My name is Graham Whitlock," he said to the camera. "Today is October 14th, 2020. I am here to undergo a full cognitive evaluation and competency hearing. I am doing this because I suspect that in the future, my nephew, Cameron Whitlock, may attempt to challenge my mental state to seize control of my company." The courtroom gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. Cameron went white, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. On the screen, "Doctor." Thorne conducted a series of tests. Graham answered every question with sharp, biting clarity. At the end of the video, the doctor turned to the camera. "I certify that Graham Whitlock is of sound mind, superior intellect, and full legal capacity," the doctor said. "Any claims to the contrary are medically unfounded." Ainsley paused the video. She turned to Cameron, who was now gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were colorless. Graham Whitlock did not have dementia. Ainsley declared. He had a nephew who tried to bribe a doctor to fake a diagnosis, and Graham knew it. He set a trap. He let you believe you had the leverage. Cameron, while he documented every single move you made. "Objection," Thorne screamed, jumping up. "This is ambuscade. We haven't seen this." "Sit down, Mr. Thorne," Judge Harper barked. She was staring at Cameron with a look of pure disgust. Ainsley was not done. "That handles the will," she said. "Now, let us handle the money." She pulled a stack of documents from the metal box. "This is the shadow ledger," Ainsley announced. "It contains 10 years of unredacted financial records for Whitlock Haven Hospitality." She held up a specific page. "Here we have a series of wire transfers totaling $5 million to Aurora Holdings. The plaintiff, Cameron Whitlock, authorized these transfers. He claimed they were for renovation consulting." Ainsley projected the document onto the screen. Next to it, she projected a second document. "This is the incorporation paper for Aurora Holdings," she said. "It lists the sole beneficiary as Cameron Whitlock." She turned to the jury box. Though there was no jury, only the court of public opinion. He was not paying consultants, Your Honor. He was paying himself. He was stealing from the company. And when Graham found out and threatened to expose him, Cameron tried to declare him insane. Cameron stood up. He was shaking. It wasn't fear anymore. It was the wild, cornered rage of a narcissist whose mask had shattered. "That is a lie," Cameron shouted, his voice cracking. The old man was senile. He didn't know what he was doing. He let a waitress manipulate him. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "I did not steal anything. I built that company while he was chasing ghosts. I knew about her. I knew about this little fraud before she even walked into the diner." The room went deadly silent. Ainsley smiled. It was the smile of a hunter who just heard the trap snap shut. She walked over to the witness stand. "I am sorry. Mr. Whitlock," she said softly. "Did you just say you knew about Brooklyn Rivera before she walked into the diner?" Cameron froze. His eyes darted around the room. He realized his mistake. Throughout this entire trial, Ainsley said, her voice rising, "You have claimed that Brooklyn was a stranger who targeted your grandfather. You claimed you had no idea who she was until the will was read. But if you knew about her before," she let the implication hang in the air like a guillotine blade. "If you knew," Ainsley continued, "then you knew she was the heir, and you tried to destroy her preemptively." Cameron sank back into his chair. He looked small. He looked defeated. But I was not done. There was one more lie that needed to die today. I stood up. Your Honor, I said, I have one final piece of evidence from the vault. I walked to the gallery. I walked right up to the railing where Wade and Darla were sitting. They looked terrified. They tried to shrink into their seats. I held up a document from the metal box. It was the original copy of the consulting agreement between Graham Whitlock and the Gulfview Grill, dated 1 week before the lunch. Graham didn't just investigate Cameron. I said, looking at Wade, he investigated you. I turned to the judge. My parents are here as character witnesses for the plaintiff. I said, they were going to testify that I am money hungry, that I abandoned them. I handed the document to the bailiff. This is a sworn affidavit from a private investigator Graham hired. I said, it details a conversation with Wade Rivera in which Wade demanded $50,000 in exchange for keeping my identity secret. When Graham refused to pay, Wade went to Cameron. I looked at Wade. Tell the court. Wade, I said, my voice steady. Tell them how much Cameron paid you to sit in that front row today. Tell them the price of your daughter. Wade looked at the judge. He looked at Cameron, who was staring at the floor. He looked at the reporters, whose cameras were trained on his sweating face. He crumbled. We needed the money, Wade whispered. The business was under. Cameron, Mr. Whitlock, he promised he would pay off the mortgage if we helped him. Darla started to sob. It wasn't a pretty sound. It was the sound of total humiliation. We didn't mean to hurt you. Brooklyn, she wailed. We just wanted to save the grill. I looked at them. For 33 years, I had thought their love was unconditional. Now I knew it was just another line item on a ledger. I turned back to the judge. I rest my case, I said. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Judge Harper did not just deny Cameron's injunction. She referred the evidence of embezzlement to the district attorney's office. She ordered an immediate forensic audit of Cameron's personal assets. Security officers moved in. They did not put Cameron in handcuffs yet, but they flanked him, ensuring he could not leave the building. The board members who had supported him were already on their phones, frantically trying to distance themselves from the blast radius. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was a sea of microphones and cameras. The questions came like a tidal wave. Miss Rivera, how do you feel? Are you going to press charges against your parents? What will you do with the company? I stopped. I looked into the lens of the nearest camera. I did not smile. I did not cry. I am not pressing charges against my parents. I said, they have to live with what they did. That is punishment enough. But they are no longer my family. I took a breath. As for Cameron Whitlock, he made a mistake. He thought money was the only thing that mattered. He thought he could buy the truth. I held up the cream-colored note one last time. He didn't tip me money, I said. He tipped me the truth. And with that, I walked away. The next day, I drove to Galveston. The Gulfview Grill was closed. The for sale sign was already pounded into the dry earth out front. Wade and Darla were gone, presumably staying in a motel somewhere, hiding from the shame they had invited into their lives. I unlocked the back door with my old key. The smell of grease was still there, but it felt stale now, like a memory that was already fading. I walked to table 12. The sun was setting over the Gulf, casting long orange shadows across the vinyl booth. I sat in the seat where Graham Whitlock had sat. I looked out at the water. I was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company now. I had a team of lawyers, a penthouse in Houston, and a future that was wide open. But I needed to leave one thing behind. I took a pen from my pocket. I grabbed a napkin from the dispenser. I wrote a single line. You do not owe them your life. I placed the napkin under the salt shaker. I took a $20 bill from my purse, my own money, earned from my own labor, and placed it on top. It was a tip for the ghost of the girl who used to work here, the girl who thought she wasn't enough. I stood up and walked out of the diner. I left the door unlocked. I left the keys on the counter. I got into my car and drove north, toward the city, toward the storm, toward the truth. I finally tipped the balance. Thank you so much for listening to Brooklyn's story of betrayal and redemption. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a busy city like Houston or a quiet coast like Galveston? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. Please do not forget to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear that the truth always wins.